Unironically, this is one of the most exciting games for the Switch in 2020 because we haven't had much of a card/board game collection available to us. So today, I'm teaming up with Failboat to rank all 51 games.
This ranking is based on how in-depth and fun the games are to play with and without people. And replayability is also a pretty big factor. Also, keep in mind that most of these games are enjoyable, so just because they're low on the list doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad.
So with that said, let's get her ranked. 51. War. I'm fairly disappointed that one of my favorite card games in person was kind of ruined in Clubhouse games. War is 100% RNG based, which is of course how it is in person, but in this game you only run through one deck and then it just ends. And on top of that, it's really slow going and honestly just feels like a waste of time.
50. Matching. Have you ever played a matching minigame before? That's all this is. You face off against another player to try to match the most cards. If this is your kind of game, then awesome, but there's very little substance.
49. Takoyaki. The objective is to pick cards from a deck and get 1 through 10 or a joker. If you pick up face cards, you just skip your turn. So like War, it's almost entirely RNG based, but picking a joker lets you flip any card you need. It's not necessarily bad, but there's very little to be desired. 48. Riichi Mahjong. Most Clubhouse games are easy to get into, but this one, not so much. The objective is to score as many points as possible, and you'll do that by making sets with your tiles. Perhaps I would find Riichi Mahjong more fulfilling if I understood it a little better, but it really sticks out like a sore thumb at its complexity. This is a game that only very specific people will be into.
47. Hare and Hounds. Here we have quite an interesting concept for a board game, but it ends so quickly that you feel like you haven't started when it ends. One person plays as the hounds, and the other is the hare. Hounds try to trap the hare, while the hare tries to escape in 30 turns. It just feels a little bland.
46. Blackjack. One of the most basic poker-themed titles, the goal is to get as close to 21 as possible with your cards. The presentation for this version of Blackjack is one of the better ones that I've seen, but it's also a game that gets old after maybe 10 to 15 minutes.
45. 4 in a Row. While 4 in a Row is a classic game that everyone knows at first glance, there are just simply other games on this list that flesh out the 4 in a Row style to make it more interesting. At least it looks pretty nice. I mean, those glossy textures are quite pleasing to feast on.
44. Nine Men's Morris. I had never heard of this game until trying it now. Nine Men's Morris kind of reminds me of chess, but a bit more simplistic. You try to create mills by aligning 3 sets of your marbles, and you'll take away 1 marble at a time from the other player. This is another solid game, but also a bit short-lived, especially since you can get into a stalemate fairly easily.
43. Fishing. I enjoy the occasional fishing game. I mean, I have the Labo fishing game, which is a whole little thing in itself. I love that one. So seeing a Clubhouse mini game with fishing makes me all happy. The fishing mechanics are pretty simple, and there is some strategy in trying to get the larger fish, but I don't know, the variety of the fish is on the low side, but it's a nice and relaxing time.
42. Sliding Puzzle. Here's a puzzle game that I'm admittedly really bad at, but it has a neat idea. There's a turtle that automatically moves, and you have to arrange puzzle pieces around to collect gems to increase your score.
41. Hanafuda. While the designs are beautiful, and it provides a great homage to Nintendo's beginnings, it's just not very well explained by the Clubhouse game characters, and even after multiple games, I just couldn't help but feel frustrated. Like, I was able to win against the impossible CPU by literally just mashing A. And I don't know, I just can't really get into the game. Personally, I just feel it's overhyped. But bonus points for that, oh my god, that slapping sound when the card, oh my god, can we hear that? Can we play that? Grr. That's nice.
40. Carrom. This is Billiards, but it feels a little lacking. The pieces come to a stop shortly after being flicked and miss that chaotic punch Billiards can pack. While the game itself is fine, I felt myself getting bored fairly fast in the beginning and wishing to just play other games instead. 39. Shooting Gallery. You really have to enjoy shooters to enjoy Shooting Gallery. Similar to Link's crossbow training, you have to shoot a bunch of targets, UFOs, or balloons at a fast pace. It's quite addicting if you're one of those people that like going for higher scores, but you also might get bored of it quickly since the patterns are always the same.
38. Dominoes. There's not much to say here, it's just dominoes. There's a couple different types of domino rules, which is nice, but I'd rather just stand them up and knock them over.
37. Mancala. Probably the oldest game in this collection. You simply move marbles around and try to collect the most to win. This one can be a lot of fun because you steal your friend's marbles by landing in an empty spot on your side. The fun factor for this one varies though. Sometimes it's something great to play for an hour, and other times it's just kinda there.
36. Pig's Tail. This is one of those card games that really keeps you on your tail, though, no, actually, yeah, pun intended. The goal of the game is to hold the least amount of cards possible. When you're randomly drawing cards and you happen to pick one that's of the same suit, you take all the cards from the middle. So there's a bit of strategy in trying to avoid picking up the cards, but a lot of this game is luck-based. 35. Mahjong Solitaire. This is a pretty satisfying game. To play, you'll be removing the pairs of tiles that are touching the edges or the sides. It's good, but there's one flaw. Once you run out of boards to complete, you're pretty much done with the game, giving it a fairly limited amount of replayability.
34. Klondike Solitaire. Quite possibly the most popular card game of all time. Klondike Solitaire is exactly what you expect out of Solitaire. I do also like the small touches that they added, like double clicking sends your cards to where you want them to go. Mechanically speaking, it plays best on a touchscreen, but you can't go wrong with using the cursor as well. 33. President. Bizarre name choice aside, President has you trying to get rid of your cards before everyone else. You'll do this by adding cards to the middle, but the number or face card has to be higher than what's on the board. There's a small layer of depth here in deciding to move the number count really high or inching your way up bit by bit.
32. Team Tanks. A fun and fairly challenging single-player experience which revives the feel of We Play Tanks from many years ago, but it lacks online for some reason. That plus it only has 3 rounds, which gives it very little replay value. If you happen to have multiple switches around, you can make larger maps and have more than one person involved, but that alone does not save this game from a lower ranking. Now, I'll go back to dreaming of a true We Play Tanks sequel that has maybe more levels than 3.
31. Renegade. I'll admit that I flat out suck at Renegade, but I can't deny that it's a pretty good time. For each turn, you have to flip your opponent's pieces to your color, and you have to figure out how to maximize the most pieces.
30. Toy Boxing. Well, Arm certainly looks a bit different in this port. This one-on-one in-your-face style is going to have you and your friends screaming at each other to drop their guard for a last-second comeback. The mind games in this simple 2-button fight are strong. However, in my opinion, there are just games in this bundle that do it stronger. 29. Spider Solitaire. The variable difficulty settings put Spider Solitaire ahead of the other solitary options on this list, as it allows for a smoother learning curve to players who are more unfamiliar with it. Like the others, Spider Solitaire provides a nice laid-back experience that's perfect for wasting time whether on handheld or in the dock.
28. Hit and Blow. What I believe to be the only team-based games in the bundle, working together or on your own to solve a randomized puzzle and trying to out each other's ideas is a great refresher from the other games that will leave you clawing their eyes out. 27. Billiards. It's not quite Monkey Ball 2 Billiards, but the Clubhouse version is pretty decent. There's a couple different variants, and it still feels pretty good aiming and hitting the balls into the holes.
26. Sevens. The 4 7 cards are all laid down in the middle, and you have to try to get rid of your cards by placing them down in numerical order. You wouldn't think that there'd be too much depth to this game, but you can actually pass turns to try to force players to eliminate themselves, since you can only pass 5 times per game.
25. Toy Curling. Here's another game that most people have already played before. You take turns hurling a curling ball down an ice path, trying to pin yourself closest to the middle. Some variants of curling are based on the quantity of curls in the center, but here it's just the one that's closest to the middle. There's a decent amount of strategy in figuring out when to hit other players' curls to your advantage.
24. Gomoku. Open World Connect 4 in a row. Similar to 4 in a row, you must construct a coherent line of your pieces in order to win. However, in this game, you must create a line of 5, and you have an entirely open board to work with, allowing for extra setup and strategy.
23. Checkers. The classic red and black tile board game. Wiping out your opponents is the main goal, and it's pretty much what you'd expect. The only downside I'd really note is moving your piece diagonally feels a bit awkward at times, but that's more of a nitpick than anything.
22. 6-ball puzzle. Puyo Puyo meets middle school geometry. Make a match of 6 pieces to wipe them off your screen. If you manage to make certain shapes, you'll send junk to your opponent's side. Overall, a pretty strong puzzle game. But personally, I always preferred Tetris to Puyo Puyo.
21. Texas Hold'em. If you've ever enjoyed Texas Hold'em, then you know what you're getting yourself into. You try to get the biggest combo and score the most points through a series of combos with your cards. It's a fairly enjoyable experience. 20. Backgammon. Here's yet another fairly old game. The main idea is to clear all your checker pieces before the other player. What makes the game so fun is you can move your checker pieces individually and in groups. Plus, you can send your opponent's piece backspaces if you land on them. This is another really solid strategy-based game.
19. Toy Soccer. Foosball, but with a slightly different feel. You control every player at once, and instead of them doing wild flip kicks, they go up and down the field, dropping as many Tatsumakis as they can send out. A great hectic and stressful and frantic game to play with friends.
18. Yacht Dice, or as everyone else calls it, Yahtzee. Your prime goal is to get the highest score by getting dice rolls of 4 of a kinds, full houses, and so on and so forth. It's missing a couple features from regular Yahtzee, but it's mostly the same. And that HD rumble of feeling the dice roll in your controller is a fantastic touch. 17. Slot Cars. Remember Slot Car Derby from Mario Party? That's basically what this game is, but it controls 100 times better. You have to move your car as fast as possible, but also make sure you don't fly off the course. Even better, you can knock your opponent's car off course if you play really carefully. With only 3 tracks though, this game could get old after a while.
16. Golf. A strong, simplistic top-down game that turns the courses from the old NES Open Tournament Golf into a laid-back experience for your Switch. As with other games on this list, you know what you're getting into when you start this up, as it doesn't really deviate much from other top-down golf games.
15. Chinese Checkers. I feel like a lot of people played this game a decade ago, then they came back to it through Clubhouse games and forgot just how fun it is. You have to move all your marbles to the opposite side before the other 2 players, and what makes this great is you can hop over other marbles that have gaps in between them. This forces you to think really creatively on when to move specific marbles, and it's one of those rare games that can only be played with 3 people.
14. Shogi. The name has a fun flair to it, and despite what the instructions tell you, it is honestly fairly similar to chess. You're trying to put the king in checkmate, and you still have pawns, knights, and rooks, as an example. A few notable differences that there's like a lands piece, there's not really a queen piece, and you can upgrade your pieces by moving them fairly close to the opponent's side.
13. Mini Shogi. And here we have almost the same game, except it's much smaller in scale. You only have 1 pawn to work with, and basically 1 of everything else. 12. Chess. The game you've all heard of and what we've been kinda hinting towards. Here's the thing with chess, mini shogi, and shogi. All the games could easily be interchanged depending on your mood and how much time you have in your day. Mini shogi might be best if you're limited on time, or maybe chess is better if you prefer using a queen that has more movement options. It really can vary quite a bit. 11. Darts. Nintendo really needed to get the motion controls down pat for darts, and thankfully they managed to pull that off. Since the Joy-Cons are a lot smaller than the Wiimote, it definitely feels a bit more realistic. It also has a couple versions of darts, which is nice. The only small downside is playing on a touchscreen is a fair bit easy.
10. Toy Tennis. An excellent way to adapt tennis into a more bite-sized version. Toy tennis limits your movement by forcing your character to run on tracks, causing you to think of the game in a more of a grid-like structure. In my opinion, the perfect way to simplify it for a more quick play experience without cutting out the mind games and quick reactions needed to keep it heated. 9. Battle Tanks. The better of the 2 tanks games. We play tanks for turns in a PvP environment. Unlike team tanks, there's no AI to take down, just your friend on the other end. Shoot and bounce your shots off the walls of 1 to 3 courses to try and down your opponent more than they down you. The rounds are a touch short though, causing the first person who lands a shot to have a strong advantage, but it's more than possible to land some tricky shots of your own to turn the tables on them.
8. Ludo. As you may know, Ludo is essentially the board game Trouble, or even Sorry to an extent. You try to take 4 pawns around the board without getting kicked back to the beginning. This is a pretty great game, with its only small downside being that it can take quite a while to finish. With that said though, some people may like that a few of the games take a lot of time to finish. 7. Dots and Boxes. You wouldn't think this would be very interesting, but Dots and Boxes has a surprising amount of depth. You start by drawing lines through dots, and you're trying to capture more boxes than your foe. You try to create paths to collect a chain of boxes, which is always satisfying to get, but then there's the fear of your opponent collecting that chain you're building. Now, like I said, this is a much deeper and gratifying game than you'd expect it to be. 6. Air hockey. Whacking pucks around a hockey ring to score points has always been a great time. The goal here is to score either 5 or 10 points to win. Moving the puck, whether with a controller or touchscreen, is very easy. There's even a button which basically lunges your puck forward for more speed. My only tiny nitpick here is you do have to re-grab the puck every single time a shot is scored, and that can get a little annoying after a while.
5. Bowling. But there's been some interesting complaints about the bowling in Clubhouse versus the bowling in Wii Sports. In Wii Sports, you let go of the B button to throw the ball, and here you hold R the whole time. But maybe it's just us, but the swinging motion still feels realistic, and honestly, it's more accurate than the one on the Wii. Maybe why I'm not bowling consistent 300s anymore.
4. Hex. Simply connect your colored tiles from one side to the other. Well, okay, I shouldn't say simply, because this game is actually really challenging. Since there's so much space surrounding your tiles, you have to think several moves in advance on where to block your opponent from making a line, as well as trying to score on your end. It can get scary really quickly, which is what makes this such a satisfying game to play.
3. Last Card. Are you a fan of Uno? Of course you are. That's why Last Card is one of the best titles in Clubhouse games. You'll try to remove all your cards before everyone else does. Overall, an excellent version of Uno, should you want to play it here. 2. Toy Baseball. Far and away the best mind game focused game on the list. The batter is at an extreme disadvantage and is forced to hold their own against the pitcher's plethora of options. As the pitcher, you have an infinite amount of time to throw out your pitch. I personally wish the time to pitch was about 5 to 10 seconds, but this creates incredibly tense scenarios as you can bait your windup, change your position, and pick from a small handful of different pitches to throw off the batter. Clubhouse even lets you hold 2 different pitch buttons at once for more mix-ups. However, if the batter can bring home the runners and get past the impregnable first baseman, it really puts the pressure on hard for your opponent when it's their turn at bat. And while playing the game solo against the bot is more of a training mode than anything, Toy Baseball is easily the most fleshed out person versus person game in the entire bundle.
And 1. Speed. By far one of the most fun and exhilarating card games in person, and it's even better than I expected in this digital form. The goal is to get rid of your cards as fast as possible by adding them between 2 card piles. I initially thought this would be really clunky to play, but you can move and select your cards as fast as your mind can think. The speed of play has an element of action. Paying attention to your cards and your opponent's cards has an element of strategy, and it's infinitely replayable on top of that. Well, that was a pretty fun list to put together. Thanks again to Failboat for helping with this list.
Indeed, a lot of these games I've never even heard of before, so learning about them was pretty awesome.
So make sure to go check out his channel and his video in the end card. And that's gonna wrap up the video, so thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Take care out there, and I'll see you in the next one.